very much, and good afternoon. Welcome into today's Community Comment. Again, I'm your host, Kevin Haugen. It's my pleasure to welcome into our Daily Dodge TV studio this afternoon. Our guests on the program this afternoon are with the Waupun Area School District. It is my pleasure to welcome into the conversation this afternoon District Superintendent Dr. Stephen Hill. Thank you so much for coming in, Doctor. We appreciate your time.
Oh, thank you very much for the opportunity.
And also joining us here on Community Comment this afternoon is the Director of Business Services, Carrie Hintz. Carrie, also thank you so much for giving us of your time here this afternoon on Community Comment.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
And we are in to discuss a important topic here that is just a few weeks away. And on the April ballot, the voters in the Waupun School District will see an operational referendum on their ballot this spring election, April 1st. There are two differentiations between the types of referendums that people can see. There's obviously a capital referendum, which more ties into facilities. This one is operational, which ties into almost day-to-day things, being able to afford operations and those types. And we'll dive into what the money will be spent on in just a moment. But I will turn the mic over to either Dr. Stephen Hill or Carrie, who would prefer to dive in on this first question. And just sort of before we dive into the specifics and go into a lot of the details about this referendum, if you could just talk about the process that the district took to get to where we are today. Just if, the meetings that took place, I'm sure surveys, I'm sure was a part of the process as well. But just what were the steps that Waupun took to get to where we are today?
Yeah, I think a good starting point is 3 years ago, Waupun area voters passed our first referendum for operational referendum, and that was for an ask of $980,000 for 3 years, which is ending now. So we're at the end of that. And so we did this community survey. We went through all that information, found everything we need to know. And what's happened in the last 3 years, which we've all lived through, inflation's only gone up. Costs have only increased. Everything's gone. All of our stationary costs, the ones that we just have to hold on to just to turn lights on and get kids to with busing and everything, those costs increase dramatically, and we'll kind of talk about that as we go through the day. So working with Carrie, she just really crunched and said all the savings we've done, everything we try to do for ourselves, kind of puts us where our ask is a little bit less. And I can let her kind of expand upon that.
Yeah, maybe this is a good opportunity, and maybe we can now move on to Carrie here, and maybe just give us a brief overview of the numbers when it comes to this referendum. How many years is it for, and just what the district is looking to borrow when it comes to this operational referendum?
Right, so as Dr. Hill mentioned, our prior 3-year referendum is kind of what we're renewing to a point. So the prior amount of $980,000 a year has been trimmed down to $900,000 a year for the upcoming 3 years. And I think we've done a really good job trimming the expense side of our budget as much as we can without impacting student outcomes and the opportunities that they have. So the real challenge that we have is on the revenue side of the budget, and revenue limits in Wisconsin very much control the money we have to work with to fund expenses. We are very hopeful that in the new budget we will get some relief with that, and we will talk about that more. If any of that comes to fruition, we actually won't need this referendum money at all. But we don't know what's going to happen with the governor's budget proposal. So we are asking for this additional amount to add to our revenue limit, which does directly come from the taxpayers, so that we can continue to, provide small class sizes at the elementary and all the opportunities that we have for our kids.
Yeah, and you bring up an interesting point that we've discussed with another local school district, Randolph School District, which is also looking at an operational referendum on their April ballot as well. And you mentioned the governor's budget. That was just announced not too long ago, and obviously a big part of what school districts are able to do are based off of what they're able to get when it comes to state aid, and obviously that process is still being worked out. We won't likely see a potential budget that the governor will sign for several weeks, potentially months from now, but for you guys, you still have to move forward and still have to plan for next year's expenses and continue to keep things moving along. So when you say, obviously, if things hopefully work out the way that you would like them to work out and you would see some funding directed your way, you still have to plan for the scenario where you just can't all of a sudden just say, oh, we're out of money when we don't know what to do. You have to make these plans now so you can move forward.
Right. So if you, in comparison to what's proposed in the budget versus what we're asking for in the referendum, if the governor's proposal, even just focusing on one item, which would be an increase in the per pupil low revenue amount, which Waupun is impacted by that. We are at the lowest per pupil in the state. And I know Randolph is in a similar situation. They're just slightly above the minimum. If that portion of the budget passed, that would mean an increase in revenues for us of just over $1.9 million next year, and then an additional almost $800,000 the following year. So even if that line item gets approved in the budget, we won't need to utilize any of this $900,000 that we're asking for at all.
Maybe this is a good question just to bring this up, as you mentioned. Obviously, if this does get approved and things do work out where the revenues and the state aid does go up and increase, what happens then to the $900,000? What would happen then?
Right. So the way the ballot question is worded, it gives us authority up to that amount to exercise each year. And we've already stated to our public that if we go through the budget process and let's just say our deficit really only looks like 500,000, we maybe wouldn't utilize the full amount. So I think that if some of the measures in the governor's proposal are approved, we certainly wouldn't need to utilize any of this revenue authority if they approve it.
And Stephen, maybe this is a good question for you. When you talk about per pupil funding, obviously it's a big component of how districts do get cash on hand to be able to afford all of the programs and stuff that they can offer. How has enrollment looked like at Waupun over the last couple of years? Has that changed? Has it gone up? Has it gone down? What's the impacts that you see when it comes to enrollment there in Waupun?
Yes, Waupun's seen a slight decrease over the last couple of years. So the funding formula works okay for a school district if you're increasing in your students. But as we declined a little bit, which is really a state trend and a national trend, there's less students coming into the system than before. So every school district in Wisconsin, other than I think maybe 4 or 5 who are in some growing areas, but they're really just picking up who's moving in from a surrounding school district. So one of the concerns we always have is that if you're at Waupun, we really want you to have a ticket to your future when you graduate, not just a receipt that you've completed high school. So we want to continue to offer all the amazing things that makes us such a strong school district and makes us such a draw and such a valuable aspect for the community. So the ask is really just to maintain where we're at. And we want to keep ourselves viable compared to larger school systems that can offer more. Because at some point, and this is a concern I have for some of our legislators who are for our area, if you don't fund us at a equitable amount, we're a rural school district, we receive probably less than what a lot of the other larger districts do, is that at some point you have a parent saying, well, maybe it's worth it for me to live a little bit farther away from where I want to live because it gives a different opportunity. So right now we have tremendous opportunities and we don't want that to go away.
Yeah, and that's an issue that a lot of school districts out in our area are currently dealing with, just in the rural component of being a school district in this type of area. That's why we see Waupun's not alone in this fight. As I mentioned, we had Randolph on a couple of weeks ago. I believe we will have Columbus School District on tomorrow, which is also looking at an operational referendum. We will have Dodgeland School District. So this is you could go down the list of the districts in our area that are going through this.
Just to go on that, so in 2022, 248 Wisconsin school districts went to referendum. In November of 24, 137 went to referendum. This year with us, we're one of 88 that's going to for in April. So what we really are trying to get across to our taxpayers is that we are wonderful. Our school board is very concerned and make sure that we are very frugal and we spend only on things that are necessary. But when you have those numbers across the state, there's only 410 school districts. So when you have well over half within the last 2 or 3 years going to it, it tells you that the actual funding formula for the state isn't working for the school districts anymore.
Yeah, it's certainly something that we've had a couple opportunities to talk about with local representatives. Mark Bourne, who comes on the program, has been an ongoing topic. I'm sure we'll see this reoccurring as the budget talks continue and as this current legislative session continues to go on. I'm sure this is something that I'm sure as a superintendent, Stephen, I'm sure you're loving to have chances to talk with our legislatures at the state capitol about this. I know other district superintendents are feeling the same way. And you brought up an interesting point earlier too, just the way things have changed over the years. Obviously, everybody can relate to this particular fact, and that is inflation has caused issues for everyone. It's not just something that you look at being able to afford your groceries and gas nowadays, but it's also affecting larger institutions like school districts here in our area where 5-10 years ago, the money from the state could cover what you were looking to do and cover a lot of those things. But again, costs continue to go up, and that state aid isn't being reflected in those changes as well.
And
Yeah, go ahead.
I just would like to say our community and taxpayers have been amazing in understanding that exact point because they do see it in their everyday life. So just imagine how your utility bill has gone up, your grocery bill, your cost for gas, and then exponentially increase that by what's happening at the school district. So when we look at things that we have to have and we can't control the cost of, busing students, our insurance for our buildings and our staff, those increases just can't be covered with the minimal revenue increases that we're receiving.
So to just kind of build upon that, so one of our numbers that we're sharing with our community is over the last 4 years, our transportation's had to go up nearly $400,000 in the last 4 years. That's a 38% increase. We haven't been increased 38%. So the cost of drivers, the cost of gas, the cost of transportation, and if we lose a few kids, that still doesn't shorten the bus route. So just because a family has graduated and moved and that home doesn't get set, the farthest home out on the route is still the farthest home out on the route, and the bus doesn't stop short because that's where we used to go.
Right.
So they travel within our 240 square miles, and they have to pick up everyone, which is great, bring all 1,859 students back in, get us going for the day, and we can't wait to see and greet each and every one of them. But that cost is a dramatic increase, and that's only one of them. Our property increase, 130% increase over the last couple of years. Carrie's aware that there's school districts who are struggling to find property insurance at this point. Just nobody wants to insure them. Explain what happened with the recent hailstorm that came through.
Yeah, so you might recall last May,
Yes.
and we in Waupun were hit particularly hard, not only at the school, but a lot of community members. So the insurance that we had in place at that time had a deductible that was per event. So all of our buildings and vehicles and everything that were damaged at the school were umbrellaed under that event. With the renewal that happened last July, not just for us, but districts across the state, all the insurance carriers are changing that up, that your deductible is now per building, and also your deductible is based on the value of that building. So what cost us a $10,000 deductible last May would now be upwards of a couple $100,000 if we had to meet the deductible on every single building and vehicle that was damaged in that storm, not to mention just the premium increase. So hopefully we won't have another event like that. But if we do, it's going to be incredibly expensive.
And I think that's such an important note to highlight here is that all these factors, you mentioned transportation, insurance costs, those are things outside of the district's control. They're things that you have no ability to say, all right, we could have made decisions differently to be able to prevent us from potentially going down this path, but that's not the case. It's factors that are unable to control, unfortunately, and those are just some of the expenses and ongoing costs that the district is facing. Maybe we can spend a couple more minutes just talking about grouping those ongoing expenses together, and just as you mentioned, Carrie, the property insurance, and there's also other costs as well that a district has to afford every year.
Right.
So looking at just our facilities, for an instance, so we have a parking project to be done, our parking lot. At some point, they need to be repaved. So, you can go over them for a while, but at some point, they degrade to the part where we can't get a bid for a snowplow because it'll damage their equipment. So that's going to be over $900,000 just for one parking lot. We can not do it for another year, but at some point, we have to do it. And it's not going to get, I've never been out for bids in all my years of doing this or my own home where it gets cheaper to wait to do a roof, or it gets cheaper to do my concrete, or
Right.
it gets cheaper to do it. Those costs just go up because of everything else, and it's part of how capitalism works, right? Is that everybody expects to make a little bit more the next year, so everything goes up a little bit more. Then you have inflation, there's some things uncontrollable, so that's just a part that go there. our curricular materials and resources. So we have to budget that out, work it out. I mean, for a reading series for Waupun, it's $100,000+ purchase. And then where Carrie and I get a little concerned is if the state comes in and says, "Ooh, we're going to change what you do." So we may have a 6-year rotation for a curriculum piece. And if the state says, "Nope," and by law they can do it and say, "We're going to change it," suddenly now we go to Carrie and we say, "We need a different source because the state says the one we're using doesn't meet their requirements." And that's fine. But if they don't realize that that's how our budgeting process works, there's another $100,000 we're not expecting to pay for doing that.
We're with members of the Waupun Area School District here on Community Comment. Joining us again are Dr. Stephen Hill, Superintendent of the District, and Director of Business Services, Carrie Hintz, who are in to discuss a referendum question that will appear on the April 1st ballot for voters in the Waupun School District looking to exceed the revenue limit by $900,000. For the next 3 years, I believe, is the window, which would start next school year.
Correct.
And it's non-reoccurring referendum as well. But obviously, people in that district are always concerned about how this will impact their wallets and what they are expecting to pay. And maybe, Carrie, this is a good opportunity to discuss some of the tax impacts if this referendum is approved this April.
Sure. So as we mentioned earlier, this is actually a lesser annual amount than what we were previously asking for. However, we totally acknowledge that it is extra funding that they are agreeing to pay. So compared to where we were, people will actually see a slight decrease in their taxes if everything remains equal. However, if somebody is owning, a $200,000 home, they are going to be paying a little over an extra $100 a year in taxes if this revenue limit exemption is approved.
Fantastic. Yeah, if you're watching on Daily Dodge TV, we do have a graphic up that does a good job of kind of going through some of the different rates and what those look like for changes based off of. Again, it's all based off of what your assessed property value is. So
Correct.
That dictates how much that you'll be paying in those taxes throughout that year, and obviously that can change if I don't know. Did Waupun just go through an assessment recently, or is that something that is still on the horizon, or do we not know the dates on those?
It was actually about 2 years ago,
Okay.
I think, was when they were last
So
reassessed.
it sounds like they might be due. It's usually every 2, 3. I don't want to just assume off it, but usually for most communities, I hear it's around that time frame. So that might be
And
on the horizon.
an increase in property values will obviously decrease that amount, per the value of a homeowner. But yeah, as the graphic demonstrates, on the $980,000 amount we previously had, people were paying about $114 a year. Now they'll be paying about $105 if the new amount is passed.
Again, we're with members of the Waupun Area School District discussing a referendum question on the April 1st ballot. Obviously, the flip side of this, we talked a lot about just the things that will be done with the money if the referendum is approved. Obviously, the flip side of that is what happens with the district if this is not approved. And obviously, if unfortunately the worst case scenario does happen and discussions at the state level don't go the way that many of the districts out here are hoping they do go, what will the next couple of months, years look like at Waupun School District?
So then we'll have to start the heavy lifting work, right? So we'd have to work with our school board and come up with a plan to meet the lower amount of revenue coming in. And that really it's a loss of opportunities. So a concerning part for me is when I went through school, probably when you went through school and Carrie went through school, opportunities were apparent, and this is what we were offering. So the families out there voting now, you don't want to shortchange your family. I think it's an injustice that you look at other school districts who are but their revenue might be $12,500 per student, and why do we have to settle for less? And if we have to cut and do more, then now we're asking our class sizes to increase. So right now we do an amazing job. If you're a kindergartner through about first grade, you might be only a class of 15 to 17, 18 tops, which we love. We want to give that one-to-one that really those crucial first years of education where they have an opportunity to be with small class sizes. They get a little larger moving after that, but then really high school, right? That's where you want all your opportunities. Back to the thing, we want you to give you a ticket to the future. So if you want to go right into the workforce, we want to give you a certificate in welding. We want you to be able to maybe build a home. We want you to be able to have some culinary skills. We have some business skills that go. Carrie just hosted our business classes, and they came through and just saw some things. So we want all those opportunities for you. We don't want to limit your options there at the Waupun High School. all that will have to be looked at and choices. Like back to again, like we have to have insurance. Our insurance carrier says we have to have cybersecurity insurance
Yeah.
now. Didn't have to have that, but 2 years ago?
Yep. It was optional up until a couple of years ago.
Optional now, so there's an increase right there. So I mean, so like that alone, I think like our cybersecurity and our technology increase, we've gone up $500,000 in the last like 4 years for costs for the equipment that our parents expect our kids to understand and utilize, and our kids want to utilize. So we have that. We have the cost of insurance, all those increases. And we don't want to take away options. I want students to come through Waupun like this is an amazing experience. It gave me opportunities. We have students right now, I think 52 students in youth apprenticeship who are able to go into the workforce right away and are trying different jobs from the medical field to their areas and going, this is for me or not for me. I mean, how awesome is that? It's something that Carrie and I talk about. We didn't have that coming out of high school. I didn't know what I wanted to do, but we're trying to get that earlier in there so students have the option to say, this is my future and this is what I want to do. It might be 4 year, it might be 2 year, it might be right into the workforce, but we want to give them so many options that they can make those decisions best with their families and say, this is really I see myself being in 2 years or 4 years or 6 years. So if we don't do it, those are some of the things. Transportation, and this is a horrible one to talk about, if we do a bus route, suddenly the bus routes, we try to keep it under.
A maximum of an hour ride.
Yeah,
So, you know, if we change our current 14 routes down to 12 routes to try to save some dollars, what does that mean for kids' time on the bus and the extension of their school day? That is a long day for a kid.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, we just had a little kindergartner fall asleep like on the bus like just a week ago, right? And missed their stop, and you know, parents were concerned, which they should be, and we feel horrible about it. But it's a long route for some of these kids on these bus routes. So then you look like a security option. So like the state passed a wonderful grant opportunity earlier in my career in Waupun, and we outfitted all of our buildings with some really top of the line technology. That's 7 years old already. Cameras, they fail. They begin to break down. Our systems start to go. So we need to replace those eventually. So unless the state comes up with another grant opportunity, which is still taxes, I understand that, but we're going to rely on our local dollars to do that. Yeah. And I think everyone agrees that we want our kids to be as safe as possible in our systems and while they're at school. So there's a cost that we have to address moving forward type of deal. Athletic and clubs, our goal, we have a goal, an internal score sheet for our key performance indicators. We want 100% of our kids in 7th through 12th grade participating in something. Well, what does that look like? Great. We've all, you can come watch amazing basketball happening right now in Waupun. We had some great wrestling that just happened over the weekend. We have a warriorette dance team. We have gymnastics. We have all these great things. And then we have esports. And then we have an outdoor club. The kids are learning ice fishing right now and doing some different things. They'll do trap shooting. We have a trap club. So we have all these different things because it meets different students' needs. Our music and band program continues to excel and grow. Can't wait for the musical coming up to come up. That's right. So this is really what's that piece of when you talk about, I graduated from a high school and these are other things I did. Rarely do I hear kids talk about, I can't, that amazing English paper that I wrote as a 10th grader. And please, my English friends, back in Waupun, don't get mad at me when you see me again type of deal. That's not what I mean. But you talk about your experiences, what you are. And my concern globally is that this is the fabric of what makes Waupun or Beaver Dam or any listener where they're at. As you start cutting that out, you reduce the ties that students will have to the community. So if they're not tied into the community as much, they may not want to stay. They may want to look to move somewhere else. And Waupun is an amazing community to live and work in. You have opportunities north, south, east, west to do larger systems if you want to go to bigger cities. But you have that small town living where you know your neighbor and you're safe and you can ride your bike and do all. And there's just so many. Downtown is vibrant. The new community center is incredible. But if I'm a student coming through and I'm like, it was school.
And that's, I think, you really can't underestimate the value of all those clubs and groups and activities because it is what makes kids feel connected and invested in the school, makes them proud to be a warrior. So we don't want to lose any of that. And just tying the conversation back to our, declining enrollment challenges, if we lose 2 kids in every grade level, that doesn't allow us to save on a teaching position or things like that. So while it's difficult financially to say lose 20 or 24 kids on the revenue side, it doesn't mean that we can have any savings on the expense side.
Yeah, and as we are starting to wrap up our time here on Community Comment this afternoon, obviously there is so much that we could dive into about this topic, and plenty of information online that people can go and research as well. But are there opportunities for members of the community out there in Waupun to attend informational meetings or sessions where they can ask questions or learn more information about this referendum?
Absolutely. Pulling up on the phone right now, just make sure I get the dates right. But Carrie and I, actually, our roadshow continues. We will have a formal presentation at the Waupun Community Center this Friday from 1:30 to 2:30. I have a formal one. We're trying something a little bit different because we've done it 3 years ago, and some people said that they would like, obviously, a hybrid version, which is like more online. And we did that one time, but we're going to do 2 online ones. But I want people to come in because it's easier for me to talk, make eye contact, see if I'm making a connection. Yeah. So on March 6th and March 17th, we're hosting it at our ESC. And you can come in here, there, or online, and all that information is on our website. And then Carrie and I will also be out in Fox Lake at our Sages School on March 13th. And then we have a couple drop-ins, but just go to our webpage. It's the first thing that pops up when you see it. You can see all the opportunities that come in there. You have 3 ways to vote. You can vote in person on the polls April 1st. You can do it beforehand at your municipal clerk's office, and you can always absentee if you're not going to be able to do the other 2 ways. And we're just very pleased that you gave us the opportunity to tell our story.
Yeah, and obviously, I'm sure for everyone in the district, you just want community feedback. You just want to know what the community thinks. You want them to go out and voice what they're thinking via voting, and that's the best way to do that. And again, that's April 1st, and plenty of ways to get your vote in to see what happens with this Waupun School District referendum. And I want to thank our guests here on Community Comment this afternoon. Members of the Waupun School District with us is Superintendent Dr. Stephen Hill and Director of Business Services Carrie Hintz. Thank you both so much for coming in today.
Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity.
And that will do it for today's Community Comment.
At US Cellular, get the new Samsung